is Adam Ballesty, the new CMO of Domino's. Previously, Adam was the APAC GM for the non-alcoholic liquor brand Seedlip, CMO of sports for Foxtel, marketing and innovation director for Diageo, and his early career saw him managing brands at Brown-Forman, Unistraw, Skins, and Pacific Brands. So welcome, Adam. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Good morning.
Great to see you. Now, guys, everyone on today's live call is muted. So any part of the conversation you'd like to have, jump on, ask questions as we go, and we'll do our best to answer them. So don't wait until the end. You're welcome to jump on any time. Now, Adam, before we get into your career journey and we'll go into some advice, we'll talk about life as a CMO as well, and I'm also intrigued also about your very recent move to Domino's. But let's just kind of get inside your head a little bit. And one of the things I always ask my friends, I'm a kind of voracious reader, is what they're getting into just now. So I don't know, is it fact, fiction? What are you reading just now, Adam?
There's a bit. I'm sort of I'm a bit weird. Sometimes I have 3 or 4 books going on at once, which is frustrating for my wife because there's too many things next to the bed. But probably no surprise at the moment, Mike, that the book that I'm reading is The First 90 Days. I've read it before. Anyone that is transitioning into a new job or a new role within a company, I sort of recommend that highly. The theory that if you don't know it after the first 90 days, you're in the job. And so the learning curve really stops. So that's the first book that I'm reading. But my guilty pleasure is Nordic or Greek mythology. So I'm reading Troy at the moment by Stephen Fry. I love him. He is an amazing writer. He is hilarious. And yeah, I'm really loving that book.
I too like Stephen Fry. I've read his early memoirs, and he's one, a very smart guy. I think everyone gets that, but just his kind of wit and turn of phrase, I think, is just silk to read. It's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, he's stunning. He literally invents conversations that Achilles is having with his father, which is impossible to have known that conversation in that room, and it is hilarious. So, awesome. But it tells an incredible story.
And the first 90 days, that makes, why am I shocked? That's perfect. Of course it is. When do you start?
Yeah, August 2, really exciting. But what's amazing is no one's working in an office if you're in Sydney at the moment, which is hilarious. But the book even talks about, you'll walk in the front door and you will walk, to the kitchen and get a cup of tea and then walk to your desk. And it tells you to enter the office from different places or find different pathways. Because after 90 days, you won't even know that, there's parts of the building or the office or the people. So, it encourages you to do lots of things differently early, or you just get into such a habit that you go from A to B as quick as you can. So, it's a pretty important book for me, walking into such a big role like Domino's.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hopefully you do get to walk in the office reasonably soon. Another kind of question I've thrown out there once before, but I'd love your take on it. If you had endless money, like $50 billion, and you could invest it in, say, Sydney, to kind of really step change the city in some way or other, what would you do?
Such a great question. And it's a hell of a lot of money. But I think that I would invest in the infrastructure to ensure that there was no plastic in the city. What plastic is doing to our oceans is catastrophic. I saw something today that microplastics have been found on the top of Everest and at the bottom of the Pacific Trench. So it's everywhere. So that'd be the first thing that I do. And there's a lot of technology out there to help us do that. And the second thing that I would do is I would plant a hell of a lot of trees and make sure that every street has a wall of trees on it and on our buildings. We need to find out ways to help this earth breathe, and we're not doing anything. And then the last thing that I would do is I'd take all cars out of the city, and it'd only be electric cars. Like, I can't believe we built a light rail in Sydney, and it's not on solar energy, as an example. Like, that's just a wild notion to me. So they're the sort of three big projects that I'd pull together really quickly.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Both runners, so I think a tree shade and a healthier environment suits us both, I think.
Yeah,
cool.
Very much so.
Let's get into your career, Adam. I'm interested in I guess early decision making, and you've got this amazing path which I touched on earlier in terms of marketing to the point you're at now, and about to take a really good role running the marketing function for Domino's. But how and why did you get into marketing, and was that one of several options you thought of when you were, I guess, in early stage career?
No, like when I was at school, I wanted to be a PE teacher. I had a really close friend of mine off to the University of Western Sydney to do a commerce degree major in marketing, and I can honestly say I didn't know what it was. I just thought he was the smartest person on the planet. So no, not part of my early thinking. I dropped out of teachers college and worked in a hardware store. My dad worked in the hardware business his whole life. So I thought, I'd sort of just go work in a hardware store. And then I got a sales rep job, and I ended up going back to university, met a marketing person, went to university. But the thing that got me into marketing was I was working for Nestle. They owned Peter's Ice Cream at the time. And I was a sales rep. I had a big white Ford Falcon station wagon. And we had to go out to Prospect, which is for Sydney, it's out near Blacktown. And that's where we would pick up all of our point of sale. And we were picking up our point of sale for the summer campaign. And so you can imagine ice cream. This is a huge, huge part of the job as a salesperson. And we were picking up all the point of sale, and it wouldn't fit in our car. And I'm like, who made this? What is wrong with people? Who made it? And it's like, oh, it's the marketing team.
Yeah.
Like, right. Well, I'm going to get into marketing because they need to understand who they're in service of. And it's not only the consumer, but it's also the sales team, So I was a sales guy. So I think I started my marketing career out of spite that I was angry. Yeah. So, and then fortuitously, a job came up in the newspaper back in those days. Wow, showing my age. I'll show my age a lot through this conversation, I think, Mike. For an assistant brand manager for a company called Swift and More, which didn't exist for a long time, but it's owned by Brown-Forman, the American mob. So they had brands like Southern Comfort and Jack Daniels. So that's how I sort of got into marketing. Yeah. But yeah.
Out of spite, that's fantastic. And do you still, as a CMO of some years now, do you still think of your sales reps and think we've got to make this work for these guys too?
100%. I don't think you can. I actually don't think you can be a good marketer unless you've been a salesperson. And Diageo, I'll probably talk about Diageo a lot in this sort of talk, because it's a company that I will love forever. And they had this gorgeous graduate program, and some of the graduates that have come out of there are they're going to be amazing business leaders in the years to come. Some of them are already doing them. All of them are already doing really great things. I sort of made the call within that sort of marketing part of the graduate program that all of them in a rotation had to be a salesperson. A couple of them wriggled out of that, but because it's hard, right? Spending a year on the road, But the ones that did, well, no, that's not fair. That the ones that didn't have done exceptional things as well. But I just think personally, it's really important to have that view of a salesperson walking into a liquor shop, talking to a manager that doesn't want to see you, selling them stuff that they might not necessarily feel they need. I reckon that's a skill set that all marketers should get a taste of at some point in their career.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think the sales perspective is super interesting. You're seeing the business at the coalface, really, of where the business connects commercially with the outside world. I think to ignore that step or not be super conscious of that step is a big gap. And if you look at early career, was that kind of the most important thing you did in early career? Was there a role that kind of you look back on and think, I'm glad I did that. That was a really kind of formative role for me.
Yeah, I thought about this question a lot, and I don't want to sort of ramble on, but I had paper rounds when I was 13, and both my older brothers had those paper rounds, but for some reason, mum and dad helped them. They never helped me. I'm not bitter, Mike. It's a paper that you would be familiar with, the Manly Daily. So I delivered the Manly Daily for about 5 years. I was talking about this job with my kids on the weekend because in 1986, I saw Halley's Comet in the Australian skies every day because I was up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every day.
Wow.
But I think the most important early role that I did in terms of forming my marketing leadership skill set was when I became the brand manager on Jack Daniels. There was a really weird time at Swift and Moore. The marketing director had left, my marketing manager left. They didn't replace them for a long time. So as this really young, green marketer, I was looking after a portfolio that was, my numbers are out, but somewhere between 65 and 70% of the business's profitability, the biggest budget, biggest volume. And I was running this brand with little to no support. And I hadn't been in marketing before. I'd been the assistant brand manager on Southern Comfort and Woodford Reserve for about 5 months before I got into that role. And here I was preparing annual marketing plans, talking directly into the managing director and the board of Swift and Moore. So talk about a sink or swim moment in my life, not just my career. Incredibly stressful, incredibly exhilarating. And, we were making decisions to get Jack Daniels back into live music, rock and roll, music events like Splendor in the Grass or The Big Day Out. And personally, I was quite excited by those things. So the decisions weren't hard, but we were still making big strategic decisions about, I wasn't using these words, back then, but Jack Daniel's role in culture and where was it relevant in Australian life. And really early on, we were in a discussion with the AFL, and I sort of, I didn't have an agency helping me sort of guide me through that. I was making a call that I don't think a big American icon sits well at that point of the brand and the other brand, AFL's sort of history was relevant. So we didn't do that, but we did do the Big Day Out. So making those decisions looking back were generational shifts in a brand's, trajectory. And I'm really, really proud of that. But I also learnt a language of the boardroom and talking to senior people like they were human beings and not these far away mythical creatures. So I think that role was defining for me.
It's really interesting because a lot of that is about taking responsibility, perhaps earlier than expected, being asked to step up and do more. And clearly, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and also the kind of business impact, of that decision making. But it feels a little bit kind of isolating too. And because I'm always interested in the team element, and you've always talked warmly and of Diageo. Was Diageo the best kind of team you worked with, or if you were to kind of look back and think, I think with all of these moments we think, gosh, at the time you don't realize it, you look back and you think, God, that was a team. That team was just gold. When you look back, is there a point when you think that was the best team I've been part of?
Hands down, that is Diageo. I came in 2012. The marketing and innovation director at the time had his sights on a big overseas gig, and he brought me in as potentially, if everything worked out, as his successor. And he moved probably quicker than maybe even himself was prepared for. And so I was actually seconded. So I started in the July. The following October, I was seconded into the marketing innovation director's role. I didn't actually get confirmed into the role until the following February. And personally, that was a really, really unpleasant time, because I felt like I had to make the role myself, but I wasn't confirmed, so you just have to get on with it. But the most gorgeous part of that journey was I was part of the marketing leadership team. I still speak to some of these guys and girls on a weekly, monthly basis. And they gave me the greatest gift of my career, which was they gave me the time and space, permission and support to step up out of their leadership team and up as their leader. And they were phenomenal. There's probably 8 to 10 humans in that journey over 5 years that were incredible business partners. They were all deeply intelligent, amazing empathy, and I love them dearly as human beings. We had one working mum, Lisa Whitworth, who was heading up shopper and category. She was 5 days a week, but we had a bunch of other working mums in there that were doing sort of 3-4 days a week and sitting on a marketing leadership team. And that's a big ask of them. That's a big ask of the business. But we made sure their work plans were right for them. I didn't want to hear from them on weekends or after 8 o'clock at night. Some of our, weekly catch-ups were very efficient. I'd suggest, let's go walk and have a coffee. And they're like, no, you sit there and we've got to get this work done.
Yeah.
It's like, right. But, talk about setting up a framework and then watching them execute and build it out and challenge. That group of human beings, I will be forever indebted, because they taught me so much about marketing, but they taught me more about leadership and team than anything. That was an incredible team.
That's fantastic. I love your comment there on working mums. I think in every instance of my career as a manager in different parts of the world, some of the highest performers I've ever worked with and the most efficient people as part of, and generous people in terms of team members are working mums who just make it happen. I think it's something about that dynamic which they don't waste time, and there's a selflessness to it as well. I love it. But,
and I wasn't exposed to a working dad in that they wanted to work, part time, but the working parent. Yeah. If I had an option, I'd employ a working parent any day of the week, even if it was 3 or 4 days, because their energy and commitment to get stuff done efficiently is remarkable.
Yeah, agreed. I want to talk a bit about career pathways. And one of the conversations I have with candidates often is around, how do they make decisions? How do they keep to their core but ensure they gather enough experiences so that they're competitive and as they move through a business into more senior leadership roles? If the core is brand marketing and you stay in brand marketing, is that enough to get to be a marketing director or a CMO, or have you got to do other things?
So it depends. I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to give you an answer, but it does depend on the organisation. So if I think about my time at Pacific Brands, and we moved the family down to Melbourne, and the reason why I left that job is because the family needed to be back in Sydney. You could have been a brand marketer and become me, like that sort of group marketing manager. They didn't have a group CMO. They had sort of different divisions. So the most senior marketing role in our division was the group marketing manager. You didn't have to have P&L responsibility, at all. I sat in the meetings, but there weren't many levers. I wasn't holding price. I wasn't holding discount. Right. I wasn't holding on products. The product general managers had that. So the profitability of the brand sat with them. We were literally a marketing communications, digital e-commerce team. So yes, could you be a brand marketer only and get the CMO role at Domino's or Diageo? No, not a hope in hell. Diageo is a very, very commercial business. The KPIs for a marketing innovation director at Diageo go from net sales through to obviously market share and brand equity, but net sales, gross margin, operating profit, so all the way down the P&L. And the conversations that I'm having with Diageo, with Domino's, are exactly the same. There is a big profit number down to EBITDA that they specifically talk to. So horses for courses, Mike. Some organisation, the CMO is in charge of, let's call it, mental availability, and that is the role. Other organisations, it's a much more commercial sort of lens, and so therefore physical availability, distribution, and price and product play a much bigger role.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Instinctively, I kind of, my view is do everything you can to gather experiences or contrasting that are going to develop that commercial skill set. And it's easy. Yeah. I think particularly if you're in a large business where the pathway is more clearly defined and you're jumping through the levels and you're feeling great about that, but ultimately you're becoming quite a specialist. And if you become a senior specialist, then I think you do lose competitiveness for the big gigs. For those who have taken their time and jumped into other functions, which is out the comfort zone and not easy to do, but it's really worth the effort in my experience.
Yeah, well, I'll just give you one more example. Say you're a brand manager at Unilever, and you go to a category job, which would be vital in an FMCG company like that, or shopper, marketing, insights, all really, really, vital and great experience. And of course, the FMCG marketer is, second to none in terms of their, marketing capability. But if they go for a job with a retailer that's got 85% of its business in e-commerce, they're going to get shot in the foot. They're not going to get past the front door because they have not transacted at scale on an e-commerce platform. They don't know how to build a team, the capability. And at Diageo, that was very, very true. At Pac Brands, we had our own retail stores, so we had e-commerce in there. That was all really great. So much faster pace. And Diageo has got some incredible digital marketers, shopper marketers, incredible e-commerce teams, but they don't have a big e-commerce platform. Yeah. That's Dan Murphy's, and Dan Murphy's e-commerce platform is, I love it, So, so there's so many things going on in the marketing sphere now that it's tricky to have it all. But the more experiences that you can get, you're just sort of building up this armory. Some people might look at my resume and go, he's jumped around a bit. And I'm like, yeah, I've got a complex family set up, and we've made some decisions on geography, based off that, or roles.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been in startups, I've been in scale-ups, I've been in ASX listed companies, I've been on companies that are on the American Stock Exchange, the UK Stock Exchange, direct to consumer, big retailers. So, I'm not saying follow my path. I'm saying there's many paths to get to where you've got to get to, but you've got to have varied experiences and solve problems from different points of view to get to the top.
Perfectly said. I completely agree. And that's what the perspective gives you of contrasting experiences, exactly what you say around solving problems from different points of view. Question in from the chat from Kevin Delaney. Hi, Adam. Do you have a philosophy or secret sauce to building brands and culture? It's something so many brands look to do, but often feels like a space where people have difficulty defining what success actually looks like.
So, hello, Kevin Delaney. Kevin Delaney is one of these graduates from Diageo that I have talked about.
Yeah.
And he went into sales and absolute rock star marketer. So I think, Kevin, when you think about getting a brand in culture, I think number one, you have to understand what the brand stands for and what it stands against. So having a really clear process for defining a brand's purpose will lead to a set of tools or gates where you can start thinking about its role in someone's life. So to say you want to have what's our role in culture is a great line, but what it really means is what is the role that this brand plays in this person's life? And, I think if I look at the example of Bundaberg Rum, we went and did a lot of work about where that brand was. And, volumetrically, it wasn't doing as good as it had in the past, but it was still a very large part of our organization. And we went and did a lot of work and tried to understand what its role was, back into the community where it sort of lived and breathed. And what we discovered in the research at the time was Australians have never been more proud of Australia. It's a gorgeous country. There's lots of space. It's beautiful. But they were getting more and more disgruntled with Australians. We're narrow-minded. We can be bigoted, racist. So, Bundy has got a great role. So do some of the really great Aussie brands. And we were all about celebrating the best of the Aussie spirit, right? So that's sort of where we got to, really well defined. Jodie McLeod, who was running the brand at the time, ex-ad agency, perfect for the role at that time. She's back on the job now, sensational marketer. And we pontificated, and the semantic arguments that we've got around that person, but celebrating the best of the Aussie spirit. Now, fast forward, and someone like Mick Fanning, the surfer, retires. And there's a person who celebrates the best of the Aussie spirit, mateship, camaraderie, having a go. Boy from Penrith, becomes a world surfing champion. So the team made him the Mick Fanning blend, sent 6 bottles, and he pumped that out onto his social media to 1.4 million people, right? What a great role in culture, literally celebrating and saying thank you. Fast forward again, and the Australian cricket team cheats in South Africa. Cheats badly. It's a dark day for Australians. It's a dark day for Australian sports. We got around a huddle in my office and said, right, what's Bundy's comment? What's our role? And by then, a fantastic marketer by the name of Hayden Abercrombie, who's now leading the innovation agenda, also looking after whiskey at the moment because someone's on a mat leave. He said, well, hang on. We're about celebrating the best of the Aussie spirit. This is the worst part of the Aussie spirit. So we don't say anything. So once you understand the role of a brand, then you can work out its role in culture. But I don't think the end game is how do we get a brand in culture? I think the question that marketers need to ask is, what is the role that our brand is going to play in that person's life or that community's life?
Great. Good answer. Good answer.
How do I go, Kev? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yeah, let us know. I work a lot with large tier one companies, Adam, but I also work with mid-tiers and increasing with small startups or as I call them, fast growths. And
yeah.
what I find interesting is when I approach candidates for small fast growths, if they're in a tier one, there's a nervousness often about, is this something that's going to take me off my defined path? Is this a risk for me? And in my view, and maybe this is how I'm selling the role, but in my view, too many of them close the conversation down quickly. And I think, there's so much to gain by taking a risk and moving into a real fast-moving business going through rapid change, which is going to be radically different to what you're doing in a tier one. Mm-hmm. What's your view? And you've done it to an extent, Adam. What's your view? Should someone entertain that conversation, or should they have their eyes on the prize in terms of that tier one career path?
Yeah, it's so tricky, isn't it? I just feel like I've just been through the recruitment process, right? And there's a lot of great talent, and I've got to be brutally honest that there were some days where, I sort of hopped off at Diageo at the right time for the right reasons, and we had great success there. And I was meant to have some time off, but I took a gamble to follow a mentor of mine, someone who I rate very, very highly in the marketing space, a guy called Andy Lark. I followed him into Foxtel. So I wanted to be as close as I could to the flame of Andy Lark. And unfortunately, he wasn't there very long. He didn't like the culture and didn't enjoy the time. So he got out of there. Have I just disappeared? My phone tried to ring, sorry.
Still got you.
Great. So, look, I sort of took that gamble. That didn't pay off for me. And then I was only there a short time. And then I was at a crossroads about, do I go back into that sort of tier one or do I go do something different? And when I looked at the Seedlip opportunity and what it was asking of its, the candidate, I just got really excited. And so I come back to, it's probably going to answer another question that you might ask, but David Smith, who was the managing director or the country director for Diageo for the majority of my time in the building, was if your career is going in the right direction, you're learning and you're having fun, there are three really good indicators. And if you're getting 2 out of 3 of those all the time, you're in a great space. And so when I looked at these 2 opportunities, one was a big CMO role, other one was the GM of Seedlip. I felt like the learning, the having fun and the growing bit, growing my career, Seedlip was answering more of that. In retrospect, the other one would have grown it in other ways and also would have continue to unlock the things that I had been learning along the way. So to come back to your question, it's really hard because once someone has a defined view of where their career is going to go, it's extremely hard to get them off that. And it's the whole, old head on young shoulders analogy. What I can say I can only talk about my personal experience. I have learned incredible things working for very large corporations, process, frameworks, ability to get things done in collaboration as a team. But in small organizations, I have also learnt roll up the sleeves, get things done. Sometimes it's ready, go, set, do some things, learn, adjust, iterate, hustle, all those things. So when I'm in a conversation with Domino's, I can talk about my ability to look at a very large budget and think about how how we should be saving money rather than just spending it all. Because, the Domino's money comes from the bank accounts of franchisees, So I can see a great responsibility and therefore my appreciation or respect for the resource of money comes at a very different level. I think if you're in a tier one organization and, you've got a media budget of $20 million and next year it's $22 million, I think that becomes really abstract to you. And I think you can really lose sight of the importance of that resource. And it's scarce wherever you are. If you have a budget of $90 million, I promise you'll find a marketer in that system that says they don't have enough money.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Yes, that's a really nice practical example of where that experience comes to bear, and your decision making and your approach and your philosophy. I completely understand that. That's great. That's great. Let's kind of jump a little bit into the role of the CMO, and some stuff I'd love to come back to and ask, but. You mentioned David Smith, for instance, as the CEO you had through most of your time at Diageo. When you're a CMO, what makes a really good relationship between the CEO and the CMO?
So I'll talk to the David Smith relationship again. David had been a marketer. That was really helpful. Some days I might say it wasn't helpful because he could trip you up. But David, for me, had a really open door policy, as he did for everyone, unless it was closed, and it was closed because he was on a phone call or in with someone else. But David is a leader that always had time, always has time, and I don't think I knew this language when we first started because I wasn't really aware of the person of Brene Brown. So Brene Brown, Dare to Lead and all that sort of stuff. One of the concepts that Brene talks about is the vulnerability of sharing a shitty first draft. And I think a lot of marketers, not just marketers, a lot of young business people feel that they have to go to a boss with, everything answered. And the old sort of saying of don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. I think that is ridiculous. If someone comes to me and they've been in marketing for a year and I've been in marketing for 20 years, why would I expect them to have all the answers? So the relationship works at its best when you can be open and vulnerable to walk in and say, hey, I think we have a challenge here with margin. Every innovation that we've poured out of this business for the last 6 months is margin decretive. I think my solution sits here, but I'd love to, to take you through my thinking, and then let's figure out, where to go to next. So I'm signaling that there is a small alarm bell in the P&L. It's my responsibility to go solve that within my remit, but I don't have all the answers. I might not have the resource, and that's time, people, money, or I might not have access to an allocation of really expensive whiskey overseas and someone's not giving it to me, but I bet they'll give it to David. And we workshop it together. And I can personally recount more than a dozen stories where I've walked up into David's office and said, hey, I think I've got a challenge. I'd love to sit down and work through that. He would literally turn the sheet of paper over and empty sheet and go, right, talk to me. And off we'd go. And he might come back to me on the phone that night. He might come back to me the next morning or whatever, but he would always work it with me. He was also very, very good at articulating what was important. So David was very good at building out the framework of his expectations. And then he was extremely good at letting me go execute that with the team. So there's a couple of ingredients there. So open to be in the rumble with you, working through solutions, really clear about expectations, building out that framework, and then the trust to go execute with that within that framework.
Yeah, great. It's interesting that David is a CEO that came from the marketing path. Now, I think if you look fundamentally at some of the skills that make a great marketer, there's a real overlap between some of those skills and a CEO. Yet not that many CEOs come from the marketing path. Why do you think that is? Is it back to the fact that we talked about breadth, commercial breadth earlier on, for instance? Or what's kind of not enabling that move to be seen more often?
So I think it fundamentally comes down to one point. And that point is that CEOs and managing directors, and then for an organization, are held to account in very, very short spaces of time. And we're now talking about the quarter. So I don't know many marketers that have turned around an organization in 12 weeks. It might be 24 months, that they do that. So it's a very practical decision to put someone in either from finance, but more and more from commercial, from a sales director's point of view, especially in FMCG, who has got the relationship directly with Woolworths or Coles, who knows how to flick a switch very quickly to get a short-term result. And we are in this sort of constant spiral of doing that. So my answer all comes down to the time frames that success looks like. And it's very hard for a traditional, so some of the marketing metrics that we now look at once a year. That's how slow some of these big developed brands, it's turning those dials so slowly with large amounts of investment. Now, that's obviously changing with performance marketing, direct marketing, e-commerce. You can really, play with some of those levers and get a result very quickly. But in the traditional marketing space, that top tier FMCG, CPG world, that is less and less. I think what I am starting to see is this role of the chief growth officer or chief commercial officer. And these chiefs really do have a sales and marketing. So one of the evolutions in my short time at Foxtel was the CMO turned into a chief commercial officer. And at one point, and it moved a million times, but, they had the call center, so they had, that part in their remit. So seeing marketers or salespeople that have got marketing and that coming together, I see that role getting some big CEO seats in the short and midterm, for sure.
Yeah. I haven't thought of it in those terms. That's really well put around that cycle and the pressure on results and the contrast to how marketers think. Adam, there's so much we haven't covered. I'd love to jump into a bunch of other questions, but we do commit to an 8:45 finish, which is about the length of the average commute. So although people's commutes are damn shorter just out in Sydney, so mine is about 14 seconds if I take a detour. But that's been awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for being so open and really kind of using some of the experiences of your fantastic career today just to bring that to life for our people on the live call today and also on the podcast. The podcast will be out next week. For those of you on the live call who are not subscribers, please jump on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe and And if you like us, be nice to rate us 5 stars as well. It does nothing but help others find us, although good for our egos as well. Now, next up, guys, we've got Esme Borgelt. So Esme is the managing director of Kellogg's, and she's come up the sales pathway, and she's going to be on the session on July 29th. Then just a week later, in terms of scheduling, we've got Michael Rowe on. Michael Rowe is a career marketer who turned sales director with J&J, jumped from one function to the other, and is now the sales director for Sellies. So another interesting background in terms of career to explore. So lots to look forward to. Adam, once again, thanks. That was awesome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the chat.
And all the best with Domino's. You're very kind, you and your team, to let me sample some products last week. I'm a convert. I'm going back to Domino's, so I'm in. Good stuff, guys. Everybody, have a great Thursday. Those in Sydney, stay safe, stay at home. But if you're bored, just listen to lots of the podcasts. It'll be all good.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Goodbye.